month ago, I was in Reno for an event, staying at a hotel with a casino on the ground floor because, well, Nevada. I was walking through said casino on the way to the elevator, and I noticed someone walking towards me, their body language suggesting that they were going to try to talk to me. I do this thing in public places where I don't really look at anyone, at least not in the eye. I'm really tall, so I can kind of just gaze upward and stare into the middle distance, and the only visual information I had taken in about the person coming towards me was that they probably had dreadlocks, I think, and for some reason my first and only thought is, I'm about to be asked for money. It didn't matter that I'd never met this person before. It didn't matter that I was in a casino where that kind of thing pretty much never happens. It didn't matter that I'd spent years of my life trying to identify and squash every bias and preconceived notion I know my brain is programmed to throw at me. In my head, I'm already anxious and preemptively annoyed when I hear them say, "Hey, do you know where the bathroom is?" I tell them where it is and we part ways. That's the beginning and the end of the interaction. Why was I so wrong? Why am I so scared of people? This is reflection. In the moment, I'm not thinking any of this. I'm thinking about getting to my room and away from the loud noises and bright lights for a minute, but reflection is important. It's important to me that I understand the thought process behind the choices I make, so in the future I can make better ones. This video is kind of light on facts. You can watch this whole thing and come away thinking I'm talking about thought crime, because in the end, it's very easy for someone to think this doesn't apply to them, that they aren't biased, that people who are biased are weak and dumb and don't operate based on logic, but emotion. And I would agree with you if you were a cyborg. Everyone hearing this is in possession of a human brain, and the human brain evolved from the ape brain, evolved from the lizard brain, etc. There are faults in the system that keep us from perceiving reality as it really is, but rather as is helpful for our survival. When you see an optical illusion, your eyes aren't tricked because of some character flaw you have or because you're an idiot. They're tricked because your brain is programmed to be tricked. All these lines are straight, and many of you knew that the moment that you saw the image, since you have experience with optical illusions. That doesn't make them look any more straight, though, does it? Now, you gotta, put your face, to the side of your computer so you can kind of look down the lines, and then it sort of looks straight. This is how I view bias. We all have it, but it's not through some character flaw. It's how our brains are wired. Our brains are wired to generalize and make seemingly educated guesses, because in the wild, that's good for survival. In society, it's not so much. Why does it matter? Pretty much every social issue we have, not only in the US, but in the world at large, stems from bias. Some of it's conscious, some of it is unconscious. I live in the US, and since I have more experience with how things work here, I'm going to be talking with a slight bias towards American issues, but this stuff can be applied to any society, from interactions as big as global trade down to a single neighborhood. The subtle feeling that you can't entirely trust people different than you can lead to all sorts of problems. Why would you vote for marriage equality for same-sex couples when unconsciously you don't see some types of love as correct? Why would you vote to expand social services when unconsciously you think that poor or sick people might just not be trying hard enough? I mean, you and all of your friends are making it work, and it's hard out there. Surely if you can make it, everyone else can too, right? When we talk about the dreaded isms like sexism, racism, homophobia, etc., many get pictures in their head of people in Klan hoods doing Nazi salutes, but that's not really what I'm talking about here. Unconscious bias is just that. It's unconscious. These biases usually do not line up with reality. They aren't based on logic, aren't based on data, and most people, once they've discovered their own biases, are uncomfortable stating them publicly for fear of being labeled as one of the isms. This keeps people from exploring why they have these biases in the first place and potentially outgrowing them. So let's talk about it. What is unconscious bias? Much like the stereotypes they're based on, not all unconscious bias is bad, per se. Personally, if I'm in a food court looking around for the best ramen, I'm probably going to choose the place that has a line full of Japanese people. I defer to a choice made by a group of people that I blindly assume has more experience than I in this department. Is this bad? Is this racist? I don't know. Racist, maybe a little. But at the same time, this isn't a scenario where my biases are likely to cause harm. I consider bias a neutral term, and as such, a bias can lead to bad things, good things, or neutral things. And yes, I realize that by thinking about this, I've moved this from an unconscious to a conscious bias. I'm aware of this, but that's okay. I can use this to inform decisions I make later. What I do with this knowledge of myself is what really matters. The biases I'm most concerned with are the ones that cause harm to people or groups of people, and I found a common thread with them. These happen when your brain is trying to tell you that one group of people is less human than you or the people that you care about. This is the optical illusion. This is the fallacy that we need to try so hard to squash. It's very easy to tolerate the suffering of others if you unconsciously separate from it and believe that it's somehow not actually that bad because the people experiencing it aren't in your group, your in-group, your tribe. Where does it come from? Humans and other animals organize themselves into groups. In caveman days, it was helpful to have a tribe. You and your tribe would go fight other tribes for food or water or idols or whatever you need. Survival instincts told us who to trust and who not to, usually based on family relation or how much said person looked like you. The drive was to protect one's bloodline and prevent extinction of your lineage. This doesn't make sense in a modern society where we have enough food, enough water, enough shelter, medicine, and rights to go around. We still tend to form tribes, though. If I'm walking around town and see somebody with a Philadelphia Flyers shirt on, I automatically make this face. Because he's not in the Penguin or Coyote or Vegas Knight tribe, God rest their souls. This can extend to religion, race, ethnicity, nationality, anime preference, anything. Which Star Wars movie is your favorite of the last two of them? Sometimes the cause is easy to identify, sometimes it isn't. But this evolution hasn't been completely organic. Our unconscious leanings are built up and even used against us all the time. If you've ever heard someone say, well, that's just how I was raised, like it's some kind of counter-argument, you know what I'm talking about. When the U.S. got started back in the 1700s, women weren't allowed to vote. It would take over 200 years for that right to be granted by the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. The 19th. Why? Have women changed over the last 300 years from someone undeserving of the right to influence their government through voting? Have they somehow gained more humanity to the point where they are now equal in humanity to their male peers? No, of course not. The people who were raised to believe that women were undeserving of a vote challenged what they were taught growing up, and change was accomplished. It also helped that women of the day protested like crazy. I would love to see what people who complain about the peaceful protests of today would think of the women's suffrage movement. Biases get handed down from generation to generation, like cystic fibrosis. When you find out it runs in your family, it's not something you can just ignore. You're responsible for that knowledge and need to take appropriate steps to make sure it doesn't hurt anybody, like yourself. The difference is that as easily as unconscious biases can be learned, they can be unlearned. The other force playing up your unconscious fears and suspicions is far more modern, and that's media. Every bit of art you consume, news you watch, and internet you absorb helps to shape your worldview. It's how we experience stuff beyond our immediate areas. Think back to the first time you saw anything with Ireland in it. I think mine was Babe, the movie about the pig and the sheep. So for a good 3 years or so, I thought that all of Ireland was sheep, an occasional talking pig, and one old farmer standing around playing the penny whistle. And I don't even think that movie takes place in Ireland. No, it was definitely filmed and set in Australia. I have a bad memory, but that was my impression of an entire nation. Well, apparently 2 nations. Advertising is even weirder because they have a goal, getting your money. It is in an advertiser's best interest to know their audience and play on their biases, both conscious and unconscious. Let me tell you a story about a fictional woman, Aunt Jemima. And to warn people who are a little sensitive, this gets a bit uncomfortable. If I sound like I'm kind of chuckling my way through this next segment, it's not because I think it's funny, it's because it's that kind of thing where I just can't believe it really happened. In 1889, there were some people trying to sell pancake mix and like cornmeal and stuff, and they decided to run a marketing campaign with their new mascot, Aunt Jemima. Now, Aunt Jemima wasn't their character, but an already popular minstrel show character. Now, if you don't know what a minstrel show is, Google it. It's a feel-good time for everybody without a conscience. This picture has the caption, Sophomore Class Minstrel Show, and it's from a high school in 1957, so wow. Anyway, in 1889, there were a lot of former slaves walking around. In 2018, we're separated from slavery by about 3 generations-ish. In 1889, the main customer for pancake mix and cornmeal, middle-class white people, were likely raised by slaves. An adult in the late 1800s has fond memories of their auntie who lived with them, raised them, and made them things like pancakes and cornbread. When we look at some of these old ads, I cringe hard. This is my ultimate cringe compilation, folks. Actually, that happened when I Googled up the picture for minstrel show. But back in the day, when the country was still very directly feeling the effects of the Civil War, a black slave was an effective advertising tool for playing on people's unconscious biases. They see a chubby lady wearing a head rag with dark skin, and their mind brings up thoughts of childhood simplicity and pancakes. I don't know about you, but I heard about this like maybe a couple years ago, but they've been using this character without changing the name of the original character, a character from a minstrel show, a type of musical theater entertainment designed specifically to make fun of the horrible situation that black Americans were in the 1800s right after slavery ended. And it's still you can still go buy Aunt Jemima pancake stuff right now at every Walmart in the country. Like, this is kind of an aside. It's just mind-blowing to me. But then you got Washington over there with this, and Cleveland over there with this. Good job making your hats just a red letter C, by the way. That's totally made me forget about good old Chief Wahoo and ugh. All right, I'm getting really off topic here. Let's get back to it. Some of the worldviews you may hold aren't shaped by logic, but rather are shaped by the culture you grow up in. Even if you have the most woke, liberal, hippie parents, unless you were kept in an underground bunker up till now, I cannot stop watching Kimmy Schmidt. You've been assaulted by ads almost every hour of every day you've been alive. These have an effect on how you perceive people, and growing up, if the only black woman you see is one that's catchphrase is broken English, when you realize that 0 black people helped develop that character, and I'd wager that 0 black people even worked for that company at the time, it seems like an utterly cynical mascot choice. What I'm saying is, Mrs. Butterworth is my lady when it comes to pancakes.
Mrs. Butterworth?
Yes?
How come you taste so yummy?
Well, my syrup is very thick.
Thick?
Twice as thick. Mrs. Butterworth takes her own sweet time. Got to be thick. One taste will tell you I'm thick.
Examples of where this is harmful. In advertising, media, daily interactions, the effects that one's biases can have on the world at large is pretty minimal. These biases become a much greater problem when they start to sneak into our laws and institutions. In the US, white people receive lighter sentences than non-white people, even after being convicted of identical crimes. This isn't some big revelation I'm bestowing on anyone, by the way. It's pretty much common knowledge in the US. As part of researching this topic, I found a cool series of publications called State of the Science, Implicit Bias Review. They've been putting it out once per year since 2013, and while the bulk of the material is an easy-to-read overview, it also cites sources for its claims. There are tons of articles to check out if you want to dive in further. In the 2017 review, they mention traffic stops and how the experience is affected by the internal biases that the officer and the system they represent bring into the scenario. It's scary. Non-white people are well documented as being pulled over more often and for less severe reasons than their fellow white motorists. When I'm pulled over in my car by the police, my biggest concern is, am I going to get a speeding ticket? I've been pulled over 4 times in my life, and every time it's because I was speeding. If you're curious, I got ticketed 2 of those times. Never once have I been asked to get out of my car, had my car searched, had myself searched, or anything like that. But I do acknowledge that my experience is not the same as many of my friends' experiences. Individuals aren't as much of a problem as the rules they work within. The system that they work within has been built on hundreds of years of implicit and explicit bias, and that doesn't change because one cop does their job well. I'm excited to see how further use of body cameras will help in this regard. No better way to reflect on behavior than to watch it back in high definition. Hopefully these cameras will lead to more just outcomes for both officers and the civilians they interact with. Education is an area where an adult's preconceived notions of a student can greatly affect that student's school experience, and it isn't talked about nearly enough internally. Obviously, no teacher believes themselves to be bigoted against any of their students, and topics like this are quickly dismissed. The idea that some students may be treated differently based purely on their appearance is treated as ridiculous. That's the kind of stuff you teach your students not to do in school, right? We have whole lessons on civil rights and treating one another as equals and all that. So the point seems so moot to many that reflecting on it doesn't even enter their minds. This is probably true of many of you, actually. You, the viewer. If you're hearing this and rolling your eyes thinking, yeah, some people are like that, but not me, you might want to work harder to challenge yourself in this area. Again, I don't view this kind of thinking as a character flaw, but rather a side effect of both our species' evolution and the societies that we live in. Teachers, principals, and students all have biases that they bring into a classroom, and they're worth examining and, in the long run, subverting. Let's look at a group that we are conditioned to believe is better behaved in class. Please hear my air quotes. Girls. I don't want to get into why it's a stereotype that girls are less disruptive, calmer, more cerebral members of a classroom than their stereotypically loud, messy, brash male counterparts, or how different expectations put on boys and girls may lead to certain behaviors being more tolerated from males than females, or how certain types of expressions are socially acceptable from girls but not boys, and I'm getting off topic again. Researchers have found, and here are all my sources, that black girls receive more than half of the discipline handed out in schools when compared to all the discipline handed out in schools to girls. Why? Trying to prove unconscious motives is pretty much impossible, but data like this means something, I think we can all agree. The paper I took the chart from suggests that it's the failure of African American girls to meet our cultural standards of traditional white middle class expectations of femininity. Please mind the quotes around the word traditional there. Teachers are more likely to see their actions as disruptive or rude, even when that's not the student's intent, which leads to more disciplinary actions. But what do you think the explanation could be? Please leave a comment and try not to be super racist down there. What can you do about it? This issue is what I see as the core ideological divide between reasonable people on the left and right. Note I say reasonable people. I'm going to ignore open bigots for the sake of argument. There is a large number of people on the right that, when confronted with data that suggests that the structure of American society may be racist, sexist, transphobic, homophobic, etc., that the rules are fair, therefore the system must be fair. It doesn't say anywhere in any police handbook to pull over only brown and black people. No company has explicit policy not to hire women to leadership positions. No sports league has a rule that you can't be gay, at least not in America. Therefore, it's all fixed and people are overreacting to just quirks in the data. It'll work itself out eventually. It must be that women don't go after promotions as much, which is technically true, but there's a huge citation needed there. Or that racial minorities must drive very poorly, so the cops pull them over all the time. Or maybe there just happen to be 0 gay baseball players out of the hundreds of men playing in the MLB, not to mention all their minor league affiliates, which makes the number closer to the thousands. These are comforting opinions to hold because it means that the status quo is fine, that you don't have to do anything. You just keep living your life exactly as it is. Everything you're doing already just happens to be the perfect way to do everything. Wouldn't that be great, by the way? Just to walk into class and just found out you got an A on a test you didn't even know you had to take. Everything you're doing already is already perfect. Every way you think is already the correct way to think. I see why it's appealing. I see why the status quo is so comforting to everyone. If you start accepting that every single human has their own set of life experiences and thus their own set of biases that they bring into any given situation, and how those biases are often completely unconscious and unknown to the person that has them, it changes how you look at things. I do not think that all cops are racist murderers. When another officer is acquitted after killing an unarmed minority teenager because they feared for their life, I don't necessarily think they're lying. I'm more interested in why they are so afraid. And I know this is an extreme example since these are life and death situations. This argument has less impact when you make it about housing or education or really anything else. Our laws are made by people, and those people's private beliefs and leanings work their way into the laws they write and vote on. And every law is a product of its own time and situation. Remember, the U.S. once legally rounded up as many of its Japanese citizens as it could and put them in camps out of fear that they may be spies helping out Japan during World War II. Almost no one would defend that practice today, yet at the time, they were relatively well received by a terrified American populace. Things can be both perfectly legal yet morally reprehensible at the same time. A common argument I hear after about my 3rd hour of talking about this with whoever will listen to me is, so are white people supposed to feel bad about all this? Am I supposed to be responsible for all the horrible things that have ever happened? And it's easy to get into this defeatist mindset because, yeah, the current political, legal, occupational, you name it, system in the U.S. favors white men. No, you can't change how people have acted in the past, and you aren't responsible for anyone's actions but your own. You are responsible for how you react to this information. Do you recede into easy, comforting answers? Do you blame women for demanding equal treatment? Do you blame immigrants for trying to improve their lives in what we keep saying is the greatest country in the world? Do you get mad at the gays for holding hands in public while simultaneously sticking your 1-year-old boy in a shirt that says lady killer? Or do you look at why you believe what you believe? Growing doesn't stop when you reach adulthood, and it's important to reevaluate your belief systems when they're challenged to see if they hold up to scrutiny. Why are so many internet people threatened by women being in video games? Why are immigrants treated so poorly in a country made up almost entirely of immigrants? Why is it okay to have a man and a woman kiss in a kid's movie, but not 2 men or 2 women, or God forbid somebody who doesn't really fit into either of those categories? What makes some people feel lesser? We are all equally human. This statement will probably strike you as very obvious, but it's the central tenet of my political, social, ethical, and even spiritual beliefs. When you see headlines about bad things happening to other people, it's hard to connect sometimes. It's infuriatingly easy to hear about how blank group is getting voter protections taken away, or how some mom or dad is getting sent to Mexico after 20 crime-free years of paying U.S. taxes, and subconsciously write it off. It's other people. It's not my in-group, so I worry. Treating people as if they are equal to you in humanity, which they are, goes a long way. It changes how you think, it changes how you vote, it changes how you interact with people. We are so much more alike than we are different.
I don't know what's happening to me. I'm getting all the blame for things I didn't do. Can anybody tell me just what I did wrong? I'm all alone and I'm so confused. I don't know what everyone wants me to be. I only know just how to be me. Once I was the ape of the hour, now they think I'm a coward. An absolute zero, I'm nobody's hero. An absolute zero, I'm nobody's hero. I'm nobody's hero.
Hey everybody, and welcome to Comment Corner, where I read comments from the last political-ish video I did and then talk about them here. As you can see, I am fully decked out in my Phoenix Rising FC gear, FC standing for Football Club, which is Arizona's highest level professional football organization, or soccer. I continue to get nonsense from English people that I talk to. They have given us the word soccer. Then when Americans continue to use the word soccer, they yell at us that it's not called soccer and we are uncultured and foolish. I think, am I allowed to hate the English? Is that a group of people I'm allowed to generalize and have a loving dislike for? Loving dislike. I have to call something that. Let's go to our first comment. This is from Zach Brenner. He says, I think the entire public education system is broken in this country. You have kids that don't care, get bad grades, and don't show up that the school puts a lot of that the school puts a lot of resources into, while you have kids that show up even when they are sick, get good grades, and actively participate in their future, that receive less resources and end up getting nothing out of their middle and high school public education because they are driven enough to educate themselves at home. And Zach, at least with the last part you were talking about there, online education, online high school is a thing that works out really well for some people. If it's used as a way to just kind of get out of high school earlier, it tends to not work. But some people who are highly introverted and don't do well in a social environment, that might be a great option for you. But I want to look at the first half of this. The kids that don't care, get bad grades, and don't show up at school. When else in someone's life are you going to have a better opportunity to change a person? It's not going to be when they're 35. It's not going to be when they're your coworker. When somebody is between the ages of 5 and 18, that's probably your best opportunity to socialize them into, look, this is how it's supposed to be, and this is how you can be a productive member of society, and how you can get along with other human beings in a way that's helpful to everyone involved. And also, I remember that some of the kids who are showing up when they're sick don't show up because they have so much drive for school. It's because they can't stay home because their parents can't take a day off to stay home with them while they are sick. So instead, they get sent to school to get all the other kids sick. While I consider the public education system in the U.S. in need of a lot of work, I do not consider it worth throwing out at this point. It is not so broken that we should completely remove it. It's the best that we have at this point, and while it could be much, much better, not having it at all, I think would be worse. To the next comment. This is from Dry Scale Milk Drops. They say, I used to consider myself more libertarian when it came to economics, but I'm quickly reevaluating my positions because of the massive issues with the American dream. I'm with you on the frustrations of having a college degree and debts in a sensible area and still barely making it. Keep up the good work. Yeah, I think that libertarianism is something that when people find out about it, when you're, late high school, early college, it seems really cool. It's all about personal responsibility. It's all about all these social things and the man that's keeping you from doing stuff you don't want to do. That would all be gone in the libertarian system. You just do whatever you want as long as you're not hurting people, and the government only exists to protect its borders and to protect your property, where if someone commits crimes against you, they'll help. But other than that, it's freedom. Everyone does, you do what you're capable of, which works out really well if everyone is in the exact same starting conditions. And we go on actually in comments on the YouTube page where we kind of come to an agreement where libertarianism nowadays seems to just be used as a justification method to be as selfish as you want to be. Really, it'd be really rich people would get even really richer, and really poor people would continue to be poor, but then said rich people would just be able to mess with them even more and take even more of their money for dumb reasons. Hey, I own this road. Good luck getting anywhere. Hey, I own this bridge. Better pay that toll. Oh, and lastly, I want to thank all my Patreon people for the past month. People who have stuck with me for months and months. I can't believe how many of you guys there are. Everybody who's new this time, thanks. I will be saying your names as accurately as possible, unless you don't want me to do that, in which case feel free to change your screen name to the most confusing thing you can think of. Thanks to Ali, Glasson, Petrov Neutrino, Cheesy, Blader the Mexican Wolf, Tammy Foxer, Ethan Long, Musical Husky, Blue Gray Fox, Bryant Holmes, Grace Jane Gollinger. I know you've said how to say that, I just keep forgetting. The Draggett Show, Omega Dragon, East Shore, Pone E. Sharp, Silver Gatoman, Mama T, Jacob Stellato, Hachi Shibaru, Piper Malone, Zelf, the Great White Lamanite. That's a weird one. Christofferson, Cyber Lupus, Ren Yina, Finnish Analytical Marxist. I like how that one. Dusty Montail, Kanon, Dead Picat, Webster, Nyox, Ty Husky, Silverwolf 1122, Ricardo Hompus, Ralts Clamar, Matthew B., Sully, Brendan Fancy Fox. He lost the Mick. It's just Fancy Fox now. Strontium, Cyphodius, Fox Amore, Ruth, Bubbles Fennec, Fur. Oh, and Wheelie. Wheelie just didn't choose a reward, even though this is what you'd get. This is what you did think. If you want your name added to that list, head on over and give me money. Sign up to automatically give me money once a month, and hope I keep doing things. Thanks, guys. I really couldn't do this stuff without you, and I appreciate you being here for me. We'll see you next time. And do you want me to do more of this or do more songs? This one I did this and a song to make everyone happy, potentially, or make everyone upset. Let me know what you want more content to be. I'll totally do whatever you guys. I'm just making stuff. I'm just throwing stuff at a wall and hoping some of it sticks. All right. See you later. Bye-bye.